Could a single strike rewrite the balance of power in Eastern Europe? In late summer 2025, Ukrainian missile engineers believed so and set out to prove it. Their target? A $1.5 billion Russian artillery warehouse near Belgorod, a fortified logistics hub supplying frontline units along the Kharkiv axis. Intelligence reports from NATO confirmed that this facility stored high-precision 152mm shells, thermobaric munitions, and replacement barrels for the self-propelled Feint S howitzers, a treasure trove that fueled Russia's relentless bombardments. The plan was not just destruction, but demonstration, to show that Western precision guidance, fused with Ukrainian ingenuity, could dismantle one of the world's most formidable layered defenses. The first phase began with what seemed like a careless mistake, a series of low-flying drone flamingo decoys drifting toward Russian radar grids. These expendable craft carried transponders designed to mimic Storm Shadow and ATACMS radar signatures. Their purpose was deadly simple: force Russian S-400 and Buk crews to light up their radar arrays. Each emission was captured, triangulated, and recorded by NATO reconnaissance planes orbiting over the Black Sea. Within hours, analysts traced a map of Russia's active surface-to-air network, a digital fingerprint that would guide Ukraine's next move. Western defense sources confirmed that this data harvest strategy mirrored the US Air Force's own suppression doctrine. By burning the enemy's radar, Ukrainian forces effectively studied its reflexes, learning which systems engaged first, which hesitated, and where the gaps opened. It's a chess match in radio frequencies, noted Dr. Samuel Klein, a senior analyst at the Center for Strategic Aerospace Studies. Ukraine is teaching NATO in real time how to fight an integrated air defense without owning the sky. In Kiev, senior officers from the newly formed Cyberstrike Directorate merged this radar intelligence with satellite data from the US Space Command. They discovered the Russian warehouse sat beneath overlapping radar coverage. Theoretically, invincible. But human error changed everything. Maintenance logs intercepted from Russian military channels revealed one radar dome was down for repairs. Another was running at half power due to generator strain. That window of vulnerability, lasting only 90 minutes, became the golden opportunity. On August 22nd, Ukrainian planners initiated Operation Stolen Exam. It wasn't an official NATO operation, but Western observers privately admitted it carried the fingerprints of American tactical design. 4 missile types were prepared: 2 US-supplied ATACMS Block 1A, 1 locally modified Neptune with extended range, and 1 Franco-British Storm Shadow. Each weapon had distinct flight dynamics and radar signatures, chosen to stress different defensive layers simultaneously. The timing was exquisite. As the decoy wave resumed, Russian air defense crews overloaded their targeting computers, chasing phantom threats. Seconds later, the real missiles launched from dispersed sites across central Ukraine. Their trajectories diverged, skimming treetops, riverbeds, and industrial skylines. Radar operators reported dozens of inbound hostiles, unable to distinguish the lethal from the fake. The first hit arrived 12 minutes later, a shockwave that rippled through Belgorod's outskirts, lighting the night sky like dawn. What followed was not just a tactical victory, but a technological revelation. The strike proved that even the most expensive defenses could be unraveled by data, deception, and timing. "This is algorithmic warfare in practice," said a NATO electronic warfare officer anonymously. "Not about who fires first, but who learns faster." Could this be the blueprint for future Western operations in contested skies, from Taiwan to the Persian Gulf? In the days that followed the Belgorod strike, satellite images told a grim story. A crater wider than a football field, blackened rail lines, and a plume still rising 48 hours later. But beyond the visible destruction lay a subtler victory, one that lived in the electromagnetic spectrum. Ukraine's stolen exam had not only vaporized an arsenal, it had blinded Russia's defenses across an entire front. For weeks, Ukraine's suppression of enemy air defenses, SEAD units, had been conducting a meticulous campaign, not the kind that grabs headlines, but one that rewrites maps. According to Defense News, over 24 Russian radar systems, including S-300 and Buk M3 batteries, had been destroyed or jammed between July and early August 2025. These were not random targets. Ukrainian strategists aimed for the edges, trimming radar overlap zones to create invisible corridors across the Kharkiv Kharkiv-Belgorod axis. By August 20th, their work had carved a 30-kilometer-wide blind spot, just enough to allow the missile strike to thread through undetected. This method was straight out of Western doctrine. NATO air campaigns in Libya and Serbia once used similar degradation chains, peeling away defenses piece by piece until strike aircraft could slip in unseen. But Ukraine had achieved it without air superiority, relying solely on ground-based electronic warfare and precision-guided missiles. The feat stunned Western analysts. They're doing what the US once needed stealth bombers for, but with software, drones, and timing, said retired Air Marshal Gavin Doyle of the Royal Air Force, quoted by The Guardian. Russian command struggled to adapt. After each Ukrainian decoy launch, radar crews faced impossible choices: activate sensors and reveal their position, or stay dark and risk surprise. This psychological warfare, coupled with the exhaustion of constant alerts, led to mistakes. An entire S-400 battery near Belgorod reportedly fired all its interceptors at non-existent targets, depleting its stock hours before the real strike arrived. Ukraine weaponized Russian vigilance against itself, observed BBC military correspondent Jonathan Beale. They turned discipline into vulnerability. Inside NATO's Ramstein coordination cell, intelligence officers quietly took notes. The SEAD operation revealed how information warfare could amplify conventional firepower. Electronic deception, when paired with AI-based target selection, was creating a new kind of battlefield, one where the side that best managed bandwidth, not bullets, dictated tempo. A declassified fragment from the US-European Command later described it as the most data-driven strike sequence ever conducted in a non-NATO war zone. Meanwhile, in Moscow, panic set in. Russian state media scrambled to explain how a warehouse so deep inside national territory had been hit despite unbreachable defenses. Officials blamed Western space assets and Ukrainian terror drones, but satellite evidence contradicted the narrative. The blow was not only material, it was symbolic. The S-400 system, once marketed globally as immune to NATO tactics, now appeared mortal. President Donald Trump, speaking from the White House, called the operation proof that freedom's innovation outpaces tyranny's imitation. Though the strike had been planned by Kyiv, its success reinforced Washington's argument for sustained arms support. Analysts at Jane's Defense Weekly later noted that within 72 hours of the attack, the US approved additional deliveries of electronic warfare pods and long-range missiles, suggesting confidence in Ukraine's ability to exploit Russian weaknesses. The Belgorod incident, viewed through the lens of modern warfare, was not about one warehouse. It was about the erosion of predictability in 21st century conflict. Traditional front lines were fading, replaced by shifting electromagnetic frontiers. And as both sides adapted, the question lingered: how long before artificial intelligence turns every radar pulse into a battlefield decision? The night of August 24th brought a different kind of war. One fought not in explosions, but in signals. As Ukrainian missiles streaked toward Belgorod, the skies above eastern Ukraine shimmered with invisible combat. Both sides unleashed their full electronic warfare capabilities, saturating the spectrum with noise, deception, and countermeasures. It was a contest of algorithms and frequencies, a battle of the unseen that would redefine how wars are fought in the digital age. Russian command deployed its Krasuka 4 and Divnomorye EW systems, jamming satellite guidance and blinding radar feeds. At the same time, Ukrainian cyberstrike units activated Polonez and Nota jammers, designed to mimic radar feedback and generate thousands of ghost targets on Russian screens. The result was chaos. Radar consoles flooded with false returns, operators overwhelmed, defensive fire wasted on illusions. For the first time since 2022, Ukraine had achieved not air superiority, but spectrum dominance, the ability to control what the enemy sees, hears, and believes. Defense analysts from Reuters reported that NATO's airborne intelligence aircraft orbiting the Black Sea observed hundreds of simultaneous electronic emissions, creating what technicians called an RF storm. Within this storm, data packets collided, corrupted, and reassembled. Communication lines between Russian radar stations and their missile batteries began to desynchronize. Commands were delayed by seconds, a lifetime in missile defense. "It was as if time itself glitched," remarked a Western EW officer. "Their systems couldn't tell what was real or when it was happening." Ukraine's engineers had anticipated this chaos. They preloaded their missiles with adaptive frequency-hopping modules capable of switching guidance bands thousands of times per second. Each missile could listen to interference and shift its navigation pattern autonomously. It was the same principle behind next-generation USJASS MER systems, integrated into Ukraine's modified arsenal with Western technical oversight. According to Defense News, the Ukrainians had essentially built a poor man's stealth weapon, not by hiding from radar, but by overwhelming it. By the 5th minute of the engagement, Russia's air defense network began to fracture. Buk launchers fired sporadically, S-400 batteries switched to manual mode, and Pantsir units discharged their cannons wildly at decoys. A NATO after-action assessment described the scene as a digital hurricane with kinetic consequences. The missiles, still dozens of kilometers away, rode this chaos like surfers on electromagnetic waves, adjusting course each time jamming spikes appeared. What made this strike historic was its tactical synergy. A seamless blend of cyber warfare, EW suppression, and kinetic precision. Ukraine had fused these once separate disciplines into a unified kill chain. They turned the electromagnetic spectrum into terrain, said Dr. Henrik Lammers, a defense researcher at Germany's Bundeswehr University. They navigated not geography, but physics. In Moscow, military bloggers accused NATO of direct participation, but Western officials denied active involvement, calling it a Ukrainian-led operation using commercially available technology. Still, few doubted the influence of US tactical doctrine. The Pentagon had long preached mosaic warfare, a distributed AI-driven battle model where smaller systems work in concert to overwhelm a larger adversary. Ukraine had just demonstrated it, with off-the-shelf drones, software-defined radios, and ingenuity born from necessity. The broader implications alarmed both East and West. If a mid-sized power like Ukraine could paralyze one of the world's most advanced defense networks using adaptive jamming and algorithmic flight paths, what could happen if such technology proliferated to other flashpoints, Taiwan, the South China Sea, or the Persian Gulf? NATO strategists quietly began revising their own contingency doctrines, realizing that the next war might be fought less by soldiers and more by coders. The Belgorod strike was no longer a local event. It had become a proof of concept, showing that in modern conflict, control of the spectrum was control of the war. Could this shift mark the beginning of a new doctrine, where silence and signal decide who survives? When GPS signals vanished mid-flight, the missiles did not falter. They adapted. Russian electronic warfare units, desperate to regain control of the battle space, activated broadband jammers near Shebekino and Valuki. Their intent was to blind the incoming projectiles and cut them off from satellite correction. Instead, they triggered one of the most sophisticated guidance evolutions seen in the Ukraine war: terrain contour navigation, or TERCOM, fused with AI-based predictive mapping. Within seconds, the Storm Shadow and Neptune missiles switched from GPS to onboard radar altimetry and inertial navigation. Flying at altitudes lower than treetops, they read the landscape below, rivers, valleys, and industrial rooftops, comparing it to preloaded digital terrain data. A defense insider told Janes that this hybrid guidance, partly supplied through US and British cooperation, allowed each missile to feel its way through interference, using geography instead of satellites. It's the same principle as a bat using echolocation, he said, only faster, smarter, and deadlier. The Russian jammers, designed for older cruise missile profiles, became counterproductive. Their powerful emissions painted the sky with electromagnetic light, giving away positions and enabling missiles to triangulate sources of interference. One ATACMS, redirected mid-air by its onboard AI, homed in on the strongest jamming node and detonated above it, vaporizing the Krasuka 4 station itself. The explosion, captured by US infrared satellites, marked one of the few instances in modern combat where jamming literally guided a weapon home. The chaos spread. Russian radar operators, watching their screens dissolve into static, switched systems to standby. In that instant, Ukrainian missiles entered the final corridor. Their sensors locked onto the artillery warehouse, a massive concrete dome, reinforced to withstand airbursts. But the strike planners had accounted for that. The first Storm Shadow delivered a tandem charge penetrator to breach the roof. The second, a Neptune, followed milliseconds later with a thermobaric payload that ignited the stored propellants. The resulting blast registered 2.8 on regional seismic detectors. Local civilians described a second sun rising over Belgorod. According to BBC World Service analysis, the entire engagement, from launch to impact, lasted less than 14 minutes. Russian command structures failed to synchronize interception because their networks, dependent on digital relay, were saturated by false signals. They were blinded, deafened, and paralyzed, said retired U.S. Air Force Colonel Robert Keating. Ukraine turned the enemy's electronic superiority into an Achilles heel. Western observers hailed the operation as the first combat demonstration of resilient autonomy, weapons that can operate independently of satellite or human input under hostile conditions. This breakthrough caught NATO planners' attention, especially amid rising tensions in the Taiwan Strait and the Persian Gulf, where GPS denial is increasingly likely. The Pentagon reportedly requested data from Ukraine's defense ministry to integrate lessons into next-generation systems like the JASS-MXR and the AARGMER. In Moscow, however, the political aftershocks were severe. The Kremlin quietly ordered audits of all active S-400 and EW sites after learning that at least 3 other radars had been temporarily shut down by electromagnetic overload during the strike. Military blogger channels were silenced. State TV blamed foreign algorithms. The public saw only grainy footage of a distant fireball, but Western satellites captured something else. Patterns of subsequent redeployments suggesting deep concern over Ukraine's ability to hit hardened inland targets. By late August, the Belgorod explosion had shifted the tactical paradigm. Ukraine no longer needed constant air support. It had built a missile ecosystem that thrived in electronic darkness. And with NATO quietly adopting similar concepts, a new era of warfare had dawned. One where terrain, data, and silence replaced brute force. But could such autonomy one day render human oversight obsolete and warfare unstoppable? By the dawn of August 25th, the skies over Belgorod still shimmered with heat distortion. Russian emergency crews picked through a moonscape of wreckage. Twisted railcars, scorched cranes, and the skeletal remains of what had been the largest artillery depot in western Russia. What analysts soon realized, however, was that Ukraine's real victory lay not in destruction, but in orchestration. The strike had unfolded with precision that defied coincidence. 4 missiles, 4 vectors, 1 synchronized heartbeat. Each weapon, ATACMS, Storm Shadow, Neptune, and an indigenous HRIM-2 prototype, approached from a separate azimuth, converging within seconds of each other. Their flight paths exploited the gaps carved earlier by SAD missions, ensuring radar saturation from multiple directions. The Russian S-400 system, designed for layered engagement, could not keep up. Its radar processors were forced to track targets approaching at different velocities and altitudes, an impossible equation for human operators already drowning in false returns from electronic deception. The brilliance wasn't in the firepower, noted Dr. Anders Hovland of the Norwegian Defense Research Establishment, quoted by Reuters. It was in synchronization. Ukraine built a time-on-target model that rivaled NATO's best Cold War doctrines, only executed entirely by software. According to post-strike analysis shared with Defense News, the 4 missiles were sequenced to achieve cumulative disruption. The first ATACMS drew interceptors upward, forcing Pantsir and Buk crews to expend ammunition. The second, a Storm Shadow, rode through that momentary lapse, striking radar vehicles and communication nodes. The Neptune and HRIM-2 followed low and fast, their delayed approach timed precisely to exploit the window of confusion. By the time the Russian batteries recalibrated, the final missile was already seconds from impact. Western experts called it convergent lethality. Multiple weapons functioning as one organism, guided not by command posts, but by pre-programmed AI logic trees. NATO's Allied Command Transformation later confirmed that this swarm synchronization principle is being studied for integration into Europe's future cruise/anti-ship weapon program. The Belgorod strike, they admitted privately, validated years of theory in a single night. On the ground, Russian munitions stored in concrete chambers began to detonate in sequence, creating what geophysicists described as a chain-reactive overpressure wave. The blast radius extended nearly 2 kilometers, with secondary explosions continuing for over an hour. Satellite footage revealed entire rail corridors buckled from the shockwave. Russian social media briefly lit up with amateur videos before sensors intervened. Flashes of orange engulfing the horizon, followed by the haunting silence of total systems failure. The psychological impact was immense. For Russian troops along the Kharkiv front, the loss meant more than logistical delay. It meant the evaporation of artillery dominance, the very backbone of their offensive capability. Within days, Ukrainian drones documented Russian batteries firing at 1/3 their previous rate. NATO intelligence intercepted encrypted chatter referring to the empty era. Yet, amid Ukraine's celebration, Western analysts warned that such precision coordination signaled a dangerous precedent, a future where algorithmic warfare decides the tempo faster than diplomacy can respond. This was a glimpse of tomorrow's battlefield, said Dr. Elise Warren of King's College London. A networked strike, autonomous in logic, political only in consequence. At the White House, President Donald Trump praised the unprecedented coordination of free world technology while reaffirming continued U.S. support for Ukraine's defense modernization. Behind closed doors, Pentagon advisors reportedly began drafting a classified assessment on AI-guided saturation strikes, a model likely to shape U.S. doctrine against peer adversaries like China or Iran. The world had witnessed a turning point, a strike not just executed by missiles, but composed by code. As Western militaries took notes, one chilling question echoed: when software becomes the strategist, who decides where it ends? By early September 2025, the strategic aftershocks of the Belgorod strike were rippling far beyond Ukraine's borders. NATO intelligence summaries described a systemic degradation of Russia's artillery tempo, with daily shell output reduced by nearly 40%. What had once been a grinding war of attrition had shifted into a contest of adaptability, data, and logistics. The destruction of the $1.5 billion ammunition hub was not just a tactical blow. It fractured an entire operational ecosystem. With its main supply artery crippled, Russia scrambled to reroute munitions from depots in Bryansk and Kursk, forcing longer transport chains vulnerable to Ukrainian drone interdiction. The result was predictable: delays, shortages, and what Western commanders called artillery starvation. Defense News reported that within 2 weeks, Russian artillery units were rationing shells, a logistical collapse unseen since the early days of the war. For Ukrainian forces, this created an unprecedented window to maneuver. Units along the Dnipro corridor and the eastern Donbass pushed forward, supported by precision counter-battery fire coordinated through NATO's digital command grid. According to The Guardian, this operation marked the first time Ukraine used real-time kill chain integration with Western ISR, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance satellites. A target could be identified, processed, and struck in under 8 minutes, compressing what once took hours. It's the holy grail of modern warfare, said retired U.S. General Michael Vickers, a seamless link between sensor, shooter, and decision-maker. And Ukraine just proved it works under fire. NATO defense ministers quietly hailed the operation as a template for future joint engagements. The Pentagon's Advanced Battle Management System, ABMS, originally developed for Pacific scenarios, was reportedly adapted and tested during the Belgorod strike sequence. Its performance impressed European partners, prompting discussions about creating a shared Atlantic Strike Network, a digital framework connecting allied forces from the Baltics to the Black Sea. The technology we're seeing in Ukraine is rewriting NATO doctrine faster than our think tanks can process it, admitted one senior official to Reuters. But while Western capitals studied and adapted, Moscow reeled. The Kremlin ordered the redeployment of elite EW and missile defense units closer to Moscow, signaling deep insecurity about Ukraine's reach. In response, President Donald Trump reaffirmed that the United States would maintain unwavering deterrence across the Eastern European frontier, including new radar sharing programs and accelerated weapons deliveries. The strategic message was unmistakable. America was now embedding itself in Ukraine's defense architecture, not just as a supplier, but as a digital ally. Beyond the immediate battlefield, the Belgorod explosion ignited debates in defense academies worldwide. Could algorithmic precision and autonomous coordination replace traditional air campaigns? Was this the dawn of post-human strategy, where software dictates tempo and commanders merely observe? Western ethicists voiced concern that the same autonomy allowing missiles to navigate jamming could also make them unpredictable in escalation scenarios. A misread signal, an AI misclassification, and a local strike could become an international crisis. Meanwhile, global powers were watching. China's state-run Global Times urged Beijing's defense industry to study the Ukrainian model for countering Western sensor fusion. Israel reportedly accelerated integration of AI-assisted navigation in its Harpy X drones following the Belgorod lessons. Even Iran, under increasing US pressure, showcased footage of jam-resistant missile tests days after the Ukrainian operation, a symbolic nod to the shifting era of warfare. For Ukraine, however, the strategic gain was immediate and tangible. The loss of Russian artillery dominance allowed Kiev's forces to cross the Oskil River with minimal resistance, reclaiming several villages for the first time in months. International confidence surged. Western military aid accelerated. The Belgorod strike had proven not only Ukraine's resilience, but its transformation into a 21st century military innovator, one capable of shaping global doctrine from the edge of survival. Yet one question now haunts every military planner from Brussels to Washington. If algorithms can orchestrate victory, can humans still control the war they create? The destruction of Russia's $1.5 billion Belgorod artillery depot in August 2025 marked a historic turning point in modern warfare. Ukraine combined deception, electronic warfare, and artificial intelligence to execute one of the most complex, synchronized missile strikes ever recorded. The operation dismantled multiple layers of Russia's air defenses, exploited radar blind spots, and demonstrated how autonomous guidance could thrive even in GPS-denied environments. By fusing Western-supplied technology with local ingenuity, Ukraine achieved what analysts call convergent lethality, multiple missile systems acting in coordinated unison. The results reshaped the war. Russia's artillery production and tempo collapsed. NATO's confidence in algorithmic warfare soared, and Western military doctrine began to evolve around AI-enabled kill chains. Globally, defense planners saw in Belgorod a warning and a vision that future wars will be decided not by manpower, but by code, data, and timing. The question for the West now is not whether to adopt these methods, but how to control them before autonomy outruns accountability. Could Belgorod become remembered not just as a Ukrainian triumph, but as the night the machines began to think for